What's up, folks? Welcome to the Dandy Show. Yes, indeed, it's good to see you. We're going to talk about vintage style today. Yes, indeed, we got a little conversation about vintage style. We're going to answer some of your questions, and also, we've got a special guest. So, hold on to your hats, grab a cup of something, get cozy. It's the Dandy Show. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It's good to see you, folks. Everyone's looking good. You're fabulous. Yes, you are. My name's Dandy Wellington. I do videos on jazz, style, and culture. If you're new here, if you've never seen me before, if you've stumbled upon this world of vintage magic, please, of course, subscribe. I want to know, as people are starting to jump up in this chat, as people are starting to come up in here, let me know where you're watching from. I want to know where you're watching from. So, of course, today we're going to be talking about vintage style. Vintage style. It's been the theme of January into February, talking a lot about vintage style, and me doing my best to assist you, to help you out, to sort of give you at least my experiences and my sort of do's and don'ts, my little tips and tricks when it comes to vintage style. Because I've been wearing vintage for 10 years now. It's pretty much how I people. Wearing vintage is how I people. So that is a big part of what's going on today. Also, we've got a special guest, a very special guest. If you follow me on social media, you already know who it is, but don't worry, we'll cover it. So I'm just going to jump up in the chat and see what's going on. Of course, we've got a lot of good friends. What's going on? Brittany, fabulous, looking fantastic, looking very fantastic. Good to see you. I already know you do. From Pennsylvania, we've got my friend Cody. How's it going, Cody? Good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us from Pennsylvania. Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky. I've never been to Louisville, Kentucky. My man with the saxophone. We got to talk. I have a feeling that we got to talk about jazz, you and I, man. Beautiful. Thanks so much for joining. Thank you so much. Oh, and we've got folks from London in here, like original. Seattle is in the building, California, Sweden, Tennessee. There's a lot going on. Germany's in the building. Folks, it is snowing here in New York City. It looks fantastic outside. It literally is like a winter wonderland. And I'm happy to be hanging out with you, but I'm also very excited about potentially going out and playing in the snow. Yes, indeed. So, all right, we're gonna get into this. We're gonna get into this. I'm really glad to see everybody. Mr. Tom Carradine. Oh my gosh, Miss Tom is in the building. Tom is hanging out. Now I know I've gotta. Maybe I need to go change if Tom is here. How you doing, Tom? It's good to see you. It's good to know that you're here. You are an inspiration, sir. You gotta watch Carradine's Cockney Sing-Along, folks. That's gonna be happening on Thursday live stream. Yes, indeed. I think so. Beautiful. So, folks, yet again, my name's Dandy Wellington. Welcome to the Dandy Show, the Dandy Live Show. This is the first iteration of it. I figured I would sort of step up my lives and add some different elements and also figure out ways to connect with you, whether you're watching at home, watching on the go, or watching on the replay. So make sure that you throw in the comments where you're watching from so that I can know what the reach is and who's in the building. Because listen, it's all about community. It's all about connecting. It's all about getting together in these crazy pandemic times and feeling a little bit closer together. So Today's show is about vintage style, about breaking it down, answering some of your questions, and the key, when I talk about community, the key is, of course, you who are watching right now, whether you're watching on the replay or you're watching live right now, chime in. You know, I have some answers to some of these questions, and of course, we have a special guest who is super amazing. I'm very excited that she's able to join us. But many of you have been wearing vintage for a long time. Many of you are starting to dabble in it and might be able to benefit not just from what I say, but from others who are on the chat. So of course, chime in and I'll try and highlight some of your answers as we go along. Folks, I think it's time to get into it. Let's get into it. All right. Little Q&A. So I've got questions from subscribers of the YouTube channel. Thank you. And of course, I have questions from my patrons. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my patrons. They have been helping me through these tough times. Patreon is a subscription service where you can support creators that you love. And I have a Patreon, and it gives you sort of, we get, you know, behind the scenes, some patron only classes, some things that I will be debuting in the next month or so. So of course, check out Patreon. The link will be in the description of this video. But of course, if you just Google my name and Google Patreon, you'll probably find that too. Beautiful. So let's get to the questions. I'm so excited. So amazing. I can't even wait. I'm so excited. Look at that. Clapping. Okay, here we go. First question is, we've got a question from a YouTube subscriber, Cottage Reader, looking for a tailor. How do you find a good tailor? Now, this is one of these questions that I feel like is super, super important. Now, if you've watched the past few videos that I've done on vintage style, I always talk about tailoring. Like, I pretty much, I should have counted, but I said tailor a lot. Because finding a tailor is really, really crucial when it comes to buying stuff vintage or off the rack. You got to make sure that it fits properly. And every once in a while you find an item that fits properly just off the rack, and that's like amazing. It's a rare occurrence. So if that doesn't work, you need a tailor. You need someone to help you do alterations. That's a really important element. So when it comes to finding a tailor, Cottage Reader just moved to a new area and they're looking for a tailor. And so my suggestion is, first of all, look for any of the suit shops or even vintage stores in your area, places like that, places that would outsource alterations and adjustments. Those are the places that will know the good tailors in town or at least nearby. And maybe it's not maybe it's a tailor that doesn't have a storefront. Maybe it's just an individual, someone that they know who will be able to do those alterations. You know, it might just be, a small business owner, somebody who knows that craft, knows that trade, knows how to tailor things down, make adjustments. So going to a suit shop, going to your local vintage store, they will have some options. Also, if you want, you can also go to a dry cleaner. Most dry cleaners have somebody in-house who does alterations and does some sort of adjustments. Generally, the people who do alterations in dry cleaners, their focus is simple alterations. So, but who knows? Maybe that person happens to be an expert tailor, and the dry cleaner just happens to be where they've set up shop. They maybe are partnering with that business in order to do something there. So what I would suggest is going in there, checking it out, and if you want to try them out, give them a simple alteration, something that you can't do yourself, but would be beneficial for you to get a chance to see their skills. I'm seeing in the chat right here, Tom talking about his go-to tailor is in Soho. I love that. So if you're in London, folks, here it is. There is a beautiful suggestion from Tom. Any other suggestions if you happen to be around the country, the United States, or around the world, throw that in there, because a big part of this, as I say, is us all helping each other out and figuring out ways that we can expand the knowledge and connect the dots for people, because that's what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to, trying to figure out where in your community you can get these things done. I hope that helped you out, Cottage Reader. I hope so. All right, next question we have. I'm excited about this one. Okay, so my patron, a life like Vera, is that Vera Ellen? We'll have to talk about that. When purchasing vintage items, do I have a cut-off price, or do I stick to a budget? Yes, absolutely I stick to a budget, because I'm not made of money. So I do have to stick to a budget. Is that a fixed budget, like a line item that I've actually laid out? No. It's just a matter of generally being frugal, to be honest. I don't really spend I don't buy a lot of clothes on a regular basis. I'll make a purchase here, a purchase there. I'll go a few months without buying things, and then maybe I'll buy one or two things that might be above $150. It depends. It really depends on what the situation is. But generally, I think when you're processing your budget for buying vintage, or just buying clothes in general, I think there are a few things you should keep in mind. First of all, regardless of what the price is, what is the value to you? How does it work within your wardrobe? How does it work within your lifestyle? And is it something that you want? And if it is, and you are not in a position to buy it, talk to the store owner, especially if it's a small business. Who knows? They might work with you. For instance, brands like American Duchess, they have, a layaway plan, for instance. So if you want to pay for something in installments, if it's something that's actually going to really, really help you out when it comes to your, developing your vintage style, or it'll add to your wardrobe, I would suggest that. By the way, in the chat, let me know if any of these answers are providing value to you. Give me a like, throw me a little bit of love. Let me know what's going on. Also, if you have a question, please write question in caps before it, so that I can see it as a question quickly, and then I can throw it back up there. Appreciate it. And also, for you who are watching on the rewind, the same thing. Write question in there so that I can know that it is a question. I will be able to jump back in for you. So I hope that was helpful. I think when it comes to budgeting, we have to balance. I'm always aware of budget. Being a performer, being a creator, I'm always trying to pay attention to how to budget. I love this. Brittany, a nice suggestion here. Brittany has a separate savings account when it comes to clothes. That's a great way to budget. To give yourself a stipend, actually put it in a physical place so that when you look at it, you're like, okay, that's how much. And maybe it's a portion of your income that gets sort of funneled into that. Or if you're a freelancer, if you do a big job, a portion of that income may, if possible, go to that vintage clothing fund. That's a great suggestion, Brittany. Thank you very much. All right, let's jump on to another question. I'm loving these questions, and I'm loving the chat. Like, there's a lot of magic happening. Thank you very much, Vera. Vera is in the chat. I am very, very glad that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us. Beautiful. Okay. We've got a couple questions. Let's see. All right. Soip, I see this question right here. I'm going to maybe ask that question a little bit later. I might have an answer for you, but I do see that people in the chat are responding. See, I already love this. People in the chat are talking to each other. There's movement happening. There's community happening. That's what I want. That's what's beautiful. I love it. Amazing. Gorgeous. All right. Let's jump to another question. All right. JT asks about basic essentials for building his collection and starting to look the part. Now, listen, if we're going to talk about this, basics, we're going to talk about it. So, because I feel like basics are where a lot of people have trouble, because when it comes to vintage, when it comes to most things, we tend to see the most bold items. You know what I mean? Hold on for a second. Darkwing Duck. We tend to see the most bold items that are out there. But basics are a really great way to start to incorporate elements of a vintage look into your wardrobe. It's really, really helpful to have these simple basics that can in a way sort of they can sort of project a vintage aura, an aura of vintage. Ooh, yes, of course. There's a few things. So let's go into a little breakdown for you, JT. I'm glad that you asked this question. Let's go to a little bit of a breakdown. So, I love it. I love that I'm already all the way to the front of my presentation. Folks, this is live. This is how it goes. Showbiz. That's what I'm talking about. We're breaking it down. We're doing it. Beautiful. Okay. So, when it comes to basics for vintage, I have always talked about inspiration. So anybody who's taken any of my classes, anybody who knows me, knows that I preach inspiration ad nauseum, because I think that is really the genesis of having any sort of style, any, being a part of any subculture, having any hobby or anything that you love. It's inspiration. What inspires you? So when it comes to vintage, you have to ask yourself, what are the things that inspire you? What are the things that make you want to be a part of this community and a part of this sort of way of dressing? So when it comes to inspiration, I always say, think about what time period. Things, what time period is something that you really want to connect with? Is it the 30s? Is it the Jazz Age? Is it maybe Edwardian? Is it something a little bit earlier? These are the elements that you sort of have to ask yourself, what really inspires you? And within that time period, within those other elements, you should ask yourself, do you maybe want to focus on something that's a bit more formal? Like, I dress a bit more formal. I always have a tie on. I always have, sort of Oxford shoes, things like that. I always have a hat. That's more of a formal side of things. Always have a jacket, elements like that. Or do you want to do something casual? And so having that sense of what you want to do, whether you want to do something maybe formal versus casual, is really, really, really helpful. It'll help you start to process where you want to start. You know, a great example when it comes to formal versus casual is Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly. I mean, of the two famous dancers of Hollywood, formal, casual, or, you know, that sort of dichotomy, Fred Astaire, of course, is way more of a formal person. In that, you always, whenever you think of Fred Astaire, you always think white tie and tails because of that. He's that formal archetype. As opposed to Gene Kelly, who's a bit more of a rugged, sort of loose, casual individual. So processing these two things will help you get a sense of what basics you want to focus on. And if you want to do both, then it's a matter of taking into consideration your lifestyle and how to build up to that, because this is a process. I mean, I'm still building my wardrobe. Anybody that I know who is in the chat who wears vintage, anybody that I know in real life who is processing wearing vintage, they're building that, okay? So when it comes to more, let's say, more formal, or rather, more basic casual, right? Wide leg trousers. I think that is a great way to sort of focus on basics. Doing something that's a wider leg, it's got pleats, something that's a little bit loose, that will help, especially if it's high-waisted. Generally, when you talk about styles of clothing pre-1960, you're talking about higher-waisted trousers, often a little bit wider. So that'll help. Some Oxford shoes or penny loafers. Now, for instance, penny loafers at G.H. Bass, which is my go-to penny loafer brand, you know, those penny loafers, I think the most affordable one is $110. But they're well made, they're made of great leather, and so they're going to last you if you take care of them. So buying a penny loafer, and of course there are brands that have them for much cheaper. So buying a pair of penny loafers or Oxford shoes, that will help. Getting rid of the sneakers or the sandals or whatever, and going for a penny loafer that is a classic, timeless, vintage aesthetic for most people shoe. Also, a button down with a band collar or a point collar. A band collar, this is a detachable collar shirt that I'm wearing. And so doing something that is a band collar that is a little bit loose, it can kind of be open, no big deal, that can help with a casual vintage look. Because the moment you're wearing those high-waisted trousers or jeans and with those penny loafers or those shoes, all of a sudden your whole thing changes for people. Your whole thing changes. And if you add now a band collar shirt, you add maybe it's, if you're going to do a t-shirt, you're doing a horizontal striped shirt or some sort of baseball shirt, something like that. That might help. Those are little elements, basic elements that can help with a casual look, in my opinion. People in the chat, let me know if you have any other suggestions. I'm seeing right now, we're already talking about getting some Oxford brogues. My man, talking about those Oxford brogues right there, 20 pounds. It's possible. Hunt down eBay. It'll help you out. Absolutely. Well done. When it comes to something a little bit more formal, I think it ends up being a little bit, it can be more difficult because the more formal, it's the more elements that you have to add. But of course, those wide leg trousers, sometimes with a taper, that will help. Obviously, pleats. I'm always a big fan of pleats. Button down shirts, add a club collar, add a wing collar. These elements can add to a more formal outfit. And then that's when you start to add in ties and other adornments like boutonnieres, like pocket squares. These things will help to provide that formal look, even if it's on the more basic side. These are building blocks, all right? You get a good club collar shirt, come on. You literally can wear that all the time, and no matter what tie you put on it, it'll seem more formal. And of course, a club collar will seem pretty vintage. So that's definitely something that I would recommend. And I mean, I had to pull these photos because these are some of my style icons. And of course, accessories. I mentioned it already. Accessories are so crucial. So crucial. I mean, think about it this way. What I'm wearing. If I was to get rid of the waistcoat, everything else is accessories. The things that make this outfit look more vintage is the hat, the pin, the pocket square, the bow tie, the collar. These are all accessories. So if you accessorize effectively, you'll be able to achieve a more vintage look. All right? Let me know in the chat if you got some value out of that, man. I appreciate it. Beautiful. I love it. So these are the different elements that I think could be really useful for you, JT, when it comes to building your vintage style from the ground up, adding those basics. Here's another question. And I think that this particular question I might need help on. Let's see. Hold on for a second, folks. The old technical difficulties. It's happening. Oh my goodness. I love it. I have what we like to call in the business the spinning wheel of death. That's that rainbow wheel. If you have a Mac, you already know what I'm talking about. So really quickly, I want to ask people in the chat because this question is about to come up, and I think I think a lot of people in the chat have a lot of feedback on this. When it comes to starting in the vintage scene, right? Let's say you've just moved to a new town, you just moved to a new community, and you're trying to figure out how to find like-minded people. You're trying to seek out your people. And you have to ask yourself, what are the different ways that you could possibly achieve this? Of course, in the world of social media, it's way easier, really. The amount of people that I've met on Instagram alone is, I can't even I feel like I can't even properly quantify how useful a platform like Instagram has been for me to find people. But I got a question the other day about moving to a new place and trying to find people that are doing vintage events, right? Live with Joy is asking, how do you connect? How do you connect to people who are vintage in your local area? So I figured I'd ask a friend this. Folks, a friend that I met in London for the first time. We knew each other over the internet. My fabulous friend, Olga. Oh my goodness gracious. This woman has style. Like Edwardian as a foundation, but then being able to jump into the 1930s, being able to like jump into all kinds of other things. I'm so excited. So excited. Hold on for a second. My life is freaking out right now. I apologize, folks. This is live. It's happening. It's freaking happening. I love it. I love it so much. It's amazing. All right. I'm going to bring her on right now. Olga, where are you? Where are you? There you are. Beautiful. All right. So here we go.
Yes,
Olga, how's it going? How's it going, Olga?
Thank you.
Oh my God, fabulous. You look so incredible. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, we got to give a round of applause to Olga. Shout her out in the chat. I know I've got some friends from the UK who know Olga. Olga, tell the crowd a bit about yourself. Where are you from? What's going on?
So, my name is Olga. I'm originally from Poland. I originally studied art history, and afterwards I decided to turn to professional dressmaking and tailoring. I moved to London almost 5 years ago, and I started attending a bespoke tailoring course. That's the field in which I want to career in. And also, I've been wearing vintage style since I was around, I would say, 16 or 17 years old. I've been collecting vintage pieces for many years. My collection definitely increased since I moved to London, as lots of different original vintage pieces became available to me. And my still focuses around the Edwardian period. How I enjoy anything from 1890s until, let's say, 1950s.
Amazing. I mean, I gotta tell you, like watching, like understanding your style, processing it, every photo, every little thing that you do is just so awesome. I mean, I'm pretty much into Gilded Age. I've always been into Gilded Age, and having trying to incorporate that into my wardrobe in one way, shape, or form. But to sort of watch what you're doing is it's pretty fantastic. So how did you build your wardrobe? Um, how did you even start to build your wardrobe? How did that even happen?
So, first of all, thank you for the compliment. It's a huge compliment indeed from a style icon such as yourself. Um, I started attempting to dress Edwardian or in clothes that were inspired by Edwardian era, as I've said, when I was a teenager. And it actually came from my initial interest in the art of the La Belle Époque period. Um, in art, but also in literature, social matters, period. I wanted to learn more about everyday life of people at the turn of the century period. And my growing interest ended up in me trying to embrace some of the clothing style of the era that I loved so much. Initially, it was quite difficult for me to find pieces that would match the style that I liked. Partially because I lived in Poland, where you unfortunately don't have many original vintage or antique pieces because of the former communist rule,
Right,
during
right.
which most of the originals were destroyed. So I had to try to find pieces secondhand. I found lots of clothing that was either vintage or just resembled the original pieces. I was trying to mix and match to find something in the aesthetic that I like. And gradually with time, my collection started growing, and I also started to uh, curate it more consciously, because as you know yourself, with time you learn more, your style sort of narrows down to
That's
a
right. That's
certain
right.
aesthetic, what to look for, and I think you also value pieces more. So you realize that you don't have to have everything. It's enough to have a certain number of pieces that are good quality, that are statement pieces, clothing that you can wear over and over and over again, mix and match items in your wardrobe. So I think everything now is slowly developed into a more conscious style. I also started to think more about sustainability, um, mending my own wardrobe, refitting my own wardrobe. I also started making my own clothes. Um, Recently, I started to dabble a bit more into a more masculine inspired style. It's
Right.
not
Yeah.
something that's at the my aesthetic. But as I'm learning bespoke tailoring, I just find it interesting to try to incorporate more of the pieces that I can make myself into my wardrobe. And I also
Right.
find it fascinating how some of them can be um, really more feminine look. And also, that's one of the reasons why last summer I took part in the Dundee women class that gave me a broader uh, insight, a broader look on how what's considered traditional men's fashion can be interpreted in terms of women's wear and what I should look out for. So if anyone's looking to do the same, I would definitely recommend joining the Dandy class. It offers huge and
I
also some really great tips that would definitely help to build your own vintage wardrobe.
I gotta say, I so appreciate you saying that because I've been teaching this class menswear for women recently, and the whole perspective around this is as much sort of putting forth what is the tradition of menswear, but also knowing that a lot of it should be up to the wearer. It's not one of those things where it's a it's one way to do anything. There is no one way to do anything. You sort of have to process it all for yourself. You have to sort of understand what you want to achieve, what you want things to look like, and then you can go from there. And so I think that it's such a crucial aspect of of understanding what it is like to sort of have a vintage wardrobe. It's all about how you want to look. It's all about what you personally want things to look like, how you want to accessorize things, the research you want to put into it, the focus you want to put to all of the clothing. It is really up to you. Inspiration is important. Looking at those in the past who have done things is important. But at the end of the day, it's about your own personal lifestyle, right?
Yes, exactly. And also, I think when it comes to women's wardrobe, um, we actually have freedom that then when it comes to what's considered classic menswear,
Right.
probably because certain rules in menswear are not supposed to be broken, or they'll be considered a faux pas if you
Right.
did certain things. Whereas fashion, what is considered classic woman or classic style today,
Right.
is actually quite, so it gives you a lot of room to play, to experiment, and to define it yourself,
Yeah.
without the fear of judged so much to a certain
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's the key is the ability to define it yourself. That is absolutely the key. You have to figure out exactly what this, this concept of dressing is for you. Sure, you can look in the history books, but you have to take into consideration your budget, your lifestyle, and the things that you like. Because at the end of the day, we're not copying the past, we're being inspired by it. And of course, being inspired by people around us, people like you, people like Tom, people like Brittany, people in the chat that I know, people who I'm just meeting just from, 2020 being what it was and all these other things. There's a lot of people that I've just met who inspire me every day to dress the way I do, you know. So I want to thank you guys. I really want to thank you guys for doing what you do because you know, you inspire all of us. So thank you. I appreciate it. Olga, let's jump to this question. We've got this question here. I got to take a look. Because the question of when it comes to sort of finding your community and finding a vintage community, especially when you're moving to a new place. You came here from Poland 5 years ago and you found a vintage community in London. And you've also found vintage communities in Sweden and in Russia and in all these other places. I've got to ask you, as somebody who, even myself, I've been to some of those places, but not only are they foreign places to me, but those people speak totally different languages. There's a lot to process there. So my question to you is, how would you go about connecting with a vintage scene in a new place?
I it's worth mentioning what you actually said before, that social media, Instagram in particular, can be very, very helpful today. One of the blessings of social media that we can enjoy is that it actually allows you to people, or maybe rather to start or initiate certain connections that you can then take to real life and actual meetings with people. The amazing thing about social media, the scary and amazing thing, is that algorithm. So what you like to see and what you follow will be up on your page and you start seeing it. So for example, if you search for vintage clothing and vintage style, that's what the algorithm will recommend to you, and you'll discover more people, more places, more events, and so on.
Right.
Event that's probably be found online, you can probably easily access information about certain events or groups or societies relate to the area of your interest. So I think definitely a place like Instagram is a good to start to
Right.
take the first step. So, for example, you can concentrate on an area of your interest in the US or in a certain state of the US or in London or in Poland or in Russia, anywhere really. If you start browsing and if you type in historical events in such place or historical fashion or vintage fashion in a certain place, there is a big chance that a lot of suggestions either on Facebook or Instagram or just in Google search. Naturally, you will keep getting recommendations from one group to another. So that's a good starting point, just to get an initial idea what is out there and what can you look out for. To remember that vintage community as such is not one. It's very diverse. There are lots of sides to it. It has many different aspects. It looks different in different parts of the world. So
Right.
I think it's important to remember that you need to find something for yourself, something that would suit you and your needs. and that would follow the aim that really that you have for yourself when you try to get into the vintage scene.
Yeah.
Um, and another thing is to try to start establishing some connections with people. I know some people are quite shy online and they don't want to show pictures of themselves, or they are afraid of interacting with others, or maybe they just don't feel comfortable being out there in public, which is completely fine. However, if you if if you appear online, if you have a certain presence that other can see, they can relate to, it would be much easier to build connections for the future. In other words, if you start interacting with people, if you find someone who runs a vintage account, and if you start initiating some kind of interaction, if you write someone a comment or if you write them a message,
Right.
you can always ask questions. You can ask, where can I find such events? How can I participate? Where are you based? Can I join the next event? And so on. And also, if you post pictures of yourself, whether it's your outfit or something you're interested in, or pictures from your events, it also allows people to put a username. So then when they meet you at a real life event, they'll be able to recognize you and then probably approach you and say hello.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. That's exactly it. It's as much about reaching out to other people, being an active participant, as far as being an active participant in initiating, right? You sort of have to take those steps. It's out there, you know, you'll find it, but a big part of it also is knowing what your own interests are and how they could align within sort of a vintage scene. For instance, if you love old movies, what are the real world things outside of dressing a particular way? What are the real world things that you're into that then, while you go there and you appreciate it, and maybe you're wearing vintage, maybe you're sort of dressing in a vintagey way, whatever it is, you'll easily find people who will be able to connect, or who do connect to that particular thing. And maybe the style aspect of it is a part of it as well, So always connecting real world activities, whether you're into cars, whether you're into music, whether you're into antique furniture, all aspects of, you know, life hobbies and interests can be connected to some element of vintage culture. So it's really useful to sort of go also not just with reaching out to people in the vintage community about events, absolutely do that for sure, but also follow what you love and see where there is overlap and crossover for people who might be interested as well. I
Yes,
love it.
exactly. I think you've made a very good point, because there are so many aspects of vintage fashion and the vintage community itself. For example, there are people who are into jazz music, there are people who are into vintage dancing, there are people who are into vintage cars, people who are into sewing vintage, and so on and so on. Um, Obviously, when someone is starting out, there is a big chance that they are not exactly sure where do they want to head themselves, or what is their interest. But that's absolutely fine. I think the main thing to remember is to just see what works for you. You can try attending different events, and see how you feel about them. If they're fun, if you like the people that you met there, if you get along with everyone, if that's the group that has the same interests. And if, for example, something feels like it's not exactly for you, you can always try something different and you can always switch. I think it's important to remember that it's all supposed to be fun. So,
Yes.
do what you want, do what brings you joy, and you shouldn't try to, um, if a certain community doesn't feel like it's the one for you, because I'm sure there is one exactly for you where you'll find fantastic people, where you would have great fun, and where you would feel at home.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's so important to be to just remember that it is fun. And there are some, there are some communities that maybe take things too seriously or they're being gatekeepers. None of that is fun. So make sure you follow your joy. I mean, I see Professor Peaches here in the chat talking about, museum people and finding a common interest there. That is so crucial. That's such a great point. I mean, I see my man over here, Revo sax player talking about, what it's like to do, focus on jazz. There are so many different aspects of these communities. And listen, at the end of the day, when we're talking about vintage, we're just talking about life in the past. So as many things as there are that are interests in, in regular life, those interests will align with some sort of element of vintage. It's just life. So any aspect of life can be found in the past, except for iPhones, whatever. I mean, listen, I like ice cream. So vintage ice cream, let's do it. That's an option.
Well, not sure I'd like to try Victorian ice cream. It might have been a bit risky.
Oh my God. Victorian
I was
ice
thinking
cream.
for the aspect of it.
So we have this other question here about hats. This has always been sort of a hot button question. But my patron El Morris asks about hats. How do you find out what kind of hat looks good on your head? For me, this is always this is a big conversation. There are tons of kinds of hats, so many kinds, and yes, you can do the research, you can check out inspiration, all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, the best way is to just try it. Now, if you go into a vintage store, you go to a flea market, you go to a charity shop, whatever it is, there'll be hats there. Speak to the owner, speak to whoever that is, and ask to try on some hats. See what looks good on you. See what frames your face in a pleasing way. But also know that there is no one way to style a hat. If you are someone with longer hair, female identifying, and that sort of feminine dress is something that you want to focus on. There's so many different things that you can do with your hair that will change how a hat, how a hat looks, right, Olga? We were talking about this, right?
Yes. So I think there is a big difference between wearing a hat when you have short hair and long hair.
Right.
As you said, it really depends on the style that you're trying to go to. If you're looking for a hat inspired by a particular period in history, it's good to browse for some inspiration and see not only what type of hats were fashionable at the time, but also how were they worn. Because more often than not, if someone had mid-length to long hair, the hairstyle would create a base for the hat. So
Right.
up until 1920s, long hair would always be pinned in a way that would create a base for the hat itself. Especially at the end of the 19th century and in the beginning of the 20th century, the hats were so huge and they usually had to be perched on top of the head. They had to be pinned with a lot of hat pins, and you can't
Right.
really use a hat pin if your hair is let loose. So I have a few examples with me that I can show.
Amazing.
For example, an Edwardian style hat. which is made of straw. It has a very wide brim. So as you can see, because the hat is so wide in circumference here, it actually needs a particular hairstyle to fill in the space between the head and the hat. If I wore it with my hair being down or being pinned flat just next to my head, then unfortunately the hat would stick out. So that's one of the aspects. Another one is, as you've said, hats can be worn and styled in many different ways. So you can wear it on top of your head, such as this bow tie, but you can always tilt it. You can
That's
move
right.
it towards your forehead. You can place it at the back of your head. So the
Right.
fact that, for example, a certain way of wearing a hat does not suit you doesn't mean that the hat type does not suit you at all. Maybe it's only about the way you're trying to wear it. So I think it's always worth trying different positions of the hat
Yeah.
before deciding that it's not for me in general. Here we have a 1930s style fedora, and as you see, I usually wear it tilted, but you can place it and try to pretend it's a bit of a halo hat with the brim at the back.
Right.
You can wear it at the front and so on.
And I
So
love
you can
that. I
really,
love the sash that you have on that one too. It's such a wide sash as opposed to sort of other grosgrain fedoras, at least the ones that I have that are it's such a smaller sash on there. That's so great.
exactly, yes. Yeah, that was, I think it was quite common for women's hats in the 1930s and early 40s that the sashes were usually quite wide. And this one is a grove ribbon as well, which is quite
Yeah.
interesting construction.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So the cloche hats, uh, typical of the 1920s. So this is a bit of a difficult style. It looks great when you have short hair. However, personally, I don't really like it in course because I feel as if I have those the brim covers everything I can see to the sides, which feels very weird. Yeah, but as you've said before, I think one should definitely try a hat on to see if it's the style that they are looking for.
Right.
Obviously, in the current situation, it's very difficult to go vintage shopping and just to try on hats during vintage fairs or in the
Right.
stores.
Right.
Uh, but what I might suggest is that, for example, if you want to buy a hat online but you're not sure if it will fit, you may try to put on a hat of a similar shape, not necessarily exactly the same, but a similar shape, which may be a hat of, a family member of yours or a hat in a thrift store or so on, and just see if you like how it looks on you, and then decide if that's something you're looking for eventually
Yeah.
or if you'd like to continue searching.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just thinking about I clearly I love hats. I mean, I wear a hat every day. So, even this hat right here. This is, you know, a pretty simple fedora from Stetson. It's a Stetsonian. I mean, the amount of ways that I can wear this hat, the amount of things that I can do to it, the amount of like aspects to things, it's all about messing with it. It's all about engaging with it. I mean, the same way that when you put on a bow tie, you need to make adjustments to it. You need to pull on one side and just adjust it. Engage with the item and make adjustments to it and figure out what it'll take for it to look good on you. And maybe after all that process, you'll realize that, maybe that hat isn't for you. I mean, even this hat right here, I got, this is a hat that I got from Stetson also. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's really really light felt. So what it means is that I have to steam it, I have to adjust it, I have to figure out all these different ways of wearing it in order to make it mine. And so a lot of it is patience. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, I always preach inspiration, but I always preach patience. Patience is so key when it comes to processing vintage, understanding that, because it's just it takes time. This is not a situation where, or just style in general is never bought off a mannequin. It's it's developed. It's something that you come to over time. And so it's really important to give yourself the time to do it.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
have you also noticed that the more you get into vintage, the more you become interested with certain little intricacies of the decade
Oh
that
yeah.
probably only people in the vintage community know about. The thing that
Oh
I've
yeah.
noticed is that the longer you dress this way, first of all, the less you pay attention to uh, people sometimes staring at you or paying attention in public places. You
Yes.
start to forget that not everyone else is a nerd and not everyone else reads about, let's say, 1920s, 1930s, 40s fashion daily. So if
Yeah.
you put on the very extravagant 1930s hat and you style it in a way that an old Hollywood actress would wear, not everyone would be able to appreciate it, but the
Right.
people who know
Yeah.
know. And that's why
Yeah.
having a community of people around you is so important.
That's exactly it. That's I mean, that's it. It ends up being your own nerdery. Like, yes, a great aspect of being nerdy about something is connecting with other people, but also, you know, if you're a nerd about something, you're just a nerd about it, and that's cool, you know. And so those things feed into each other. Your own research, your own excitement about it personally will help you to, maybe find a community as you put that out there, as you really embody it, and just find joy in it. At the end of the day, as you say, it's all about having fun. That's all that matters. So amazing. I
Yeah.
appreciate it,
Yes,
Olga.
I think
Thank you so, so much.
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
I think it's important to remember we're all here to have fun and enjoy what we're doing and enjoy each other's company. So thank you for having me. It was lovely to participate and
of course.
inspiring other style. And I'm hoping to see you again very soon when you come to London. Hopefully more performances, because I'm
Yes.
sure we'll be all sorts of excitement and entertainment after
Ye-
we finish it.
There's gonna be so much jazz when this is all over, folks. Let's send some love, send some hearts to Olga, please. Send some hearts and love to Olga. She's the best. Thank you so much, Olga. You're super awesome. Thank you. So amazing. It's such a pleasure to have her on the chat, folks. I mean, I gotta tell you, as I said, I met her in London, and it was a few times, but just seeing people that you meet on the internet in real life who have a love of vintage and style as you do is a wonderful thing. So thank you so much to Olga, and thank you so much to you guys for hanging out and for watching and for being a part of this conversation. We have question. One more question, and I'm very excited about this one. So this is a question that my patron Brian has asked. My favorite shape of bow tie. He has asked this question, and I feel like in order for me to answer this, I gotta go to a replay. Let's do it. Talk about occasion. When picking a bow tie, it's important to consider the occasion. Is it a daytime look, a work meeting? Is it an evening or formal event? Each occasion calls for a different bow tie with a different bow tie shape. But right now, I'll just show you a few. We've got the classic butterfly, the diamond or arrow point bow tie, the modified butterfly, and the single end bow tie. These are some of the most common types of bow ties that you'll come into contact with, but there's all kinds. Yep, there's all kinds of bow ties, and there's kinds of bow ties that I didn't even mention. There's just so many. But when it comes to my favorite in particular, I will say that my favorite is definitely the sort of the asymmetrical butterfly. I mean, it's the one that I'm wearing right now. It looks like this on one side. You know, this is a double-sided one, but it looks like this, and it's such a fantastic bow tie shape, because as opposed to the regular classic butterfly, which is this, it ends up being a little bit fatter, a little bit of a different shape, and so it really provides something beautiful. I mean, I like a diamond point bow tie or an arrow point bow tie. I'm a big fan of that. But depending on the construction, it can end up looking a little bit weird. So thank you so much for that question, Brian. And I have to thank everybody who is watching one more time. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. In my mind, I was thinking, oh, let's do 30 minutes. Sure, no big deal. We're an hour because it was just so fun to talk to you guys about vintage style. So great to have Olga on. Please make sure you follow Olga on social media. She is super awesome. Very kind, and as you can already tell, she's somebody who loves talking about vintage style. And if you have any questions for her about Edwardian, or even just how she's finding ways to style different elements of clothing for different time periods, I think that that's a really incredible person to talk to. Also, I have to ask you guys, how do you like this format? Let me know in the comments below. And did you like the interview portion? I loved having Olga. Did you like listening to her? And would you like me to interview other people? Who else would you want me to interview? I gotta tell you, there's a bunch of people in the chat right now that I cannot believe are here, because I gotta shout out. Oh my goodness. Carolina, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for hanging out. Appreciate it. Who else would you like me to have on the Dandy Live show? Let me know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you can get notifications. My name's Dandy Wellington, and I'll see you soon. Honeydew, you're my little honeydew, sweeter than a bubble chew. Skies are blue when I'm near you. You're sublime, you're my perfect Valentine. Tell me that your love is true, honeydew of mine. Oh, all day, every day, I yearn for you. I hope, I pray that you'll